Good morning, afternoon, and evening to everyone watching from around the world. Off we go here with our fifth episode of Season 3 of the CIES Webinar Series. This is organized by CIES, the International Center of Sport Studies. These conversations are a collaborative endeavor with the FIFA Master Alumni Association, which is what brings me here today. My name is Tanya Heimlich-Ningen. I'm logged in from beautiful Lausanne, Switzerland. I'm a FIFA Master from the 9th edition, and I'm also a Senior Director at BCW, which is a global communications agency, which is based in Lausanne, Switzerland. So CIES, the organizer of this series, is an independent study center located in Neuchâtel, Switzerland. It provides top-level education, research and consulting services, and you can find more information about CIES and the CIES Football Observatory on our other educational programs, just like the FIFA Master or the FIFA CIES Executive Programs, in the links in the description of this webinar. So today we're going to focus our conversation on a really interesting topic, a very topical topic also, the economic trends and changes in the football transfer market. With the latest transfer window that just closed recently, the CIES Football Observatory has made a study reflecting on the latest transfer figures for the global football industry. And this is a really interesting read and with great insights. I've had the chance to read it over the last week, so it's some pretty interesting points coming out of that. So today, we are very fortunate. We have the opportunity to have Dr. Raffaele Poli, who's the head of the CIES Football Observatory, here with us today. And he's going to speak to us on the subject and provide us with some key findings. So allow me to introduce you to our fantastic guest. Hello, Dr. Poli. Hello, Raffaele. How are you today?
Fine, thank you, Tanya.
Very good. I'm just going to tell our audience today a little bit about you, if you allow me, yes?
Of course.
So, perfect. So Dr. Poli heads the CIES Football Observatory. That is a leading research group for the analysis of the transfer market and performance of football players. So he's also lectured. He's also a lecturer on many sport management programs, including the FIFA Master. I'm not sure if you were there all the way back when I did it, but I've heard wonderful things about your classes. So, and he's also the author of a lot of scientific publications. So he regularly carries out mandates for some very prestigious sporting federations and football clubs. So he's our expert. So hello, Raffaele, again. Wonderful to have you. Thank you for being here with us today. So as we go into our webinar today, so most of our webinars are roundtables where we have a few guests, but today we are very lucky. It's one-on-one with Raffaele, and we have you all to ourselves for question. But of course, as the conversation goes, just for our audience, please submit your questions and comments. We'll definitely leave some room later on to get some interaction with the audience and to ask Raffaele all the questions that you have around this great topic. So let's dive right in here. Just give us a little bit of what you do. We want to hear more about you and what you're doing in this great report. So why don't we just start? Why don't you tell us what is the Football Observatory? And what's your mission? How big is the team? What are your areas that you're investigating?
Yes, it's already a quite long story because we started, myself and a colleague, Loïc Ravenel, back in 2005. So, of course, at the time, the data was not that fashionable than today, but we started collecting the information on football players around the world, mainly from Africa, because I was doing my PhD on the migration networks of African football players. And we found out that there was a lack of reliable data in this domain, even though football is quite well covered by the media. So we started to collect this data. TMS was not existing, the transfer matching system at FIFA. It was introduced a few years after we started, but still we enlarged progressively our scope. We were focusing a lot on Europe, but as you know now, football is a global game, so now we started to cover also other leagues, and from, let's say, three main angles, which are what I will speak about today: the economics of the game. We have also developed an algorithm to assess the fair price of football players. You know that, of course, the transfer fees increased a lot during the last years, and there are huge stakes around the transfer of players. So we are covering that aspect of the game, but also more from a sporting perspective, the technical data. We have also algorithms to assess the performance on the pitch of players with some data providers that allows us now to cover the main leagues worldwide. And also a third, more traditional approach, which is around players. Where do players originate? The stability of squads, for example. Often we think that the best clubs are those who are transferring the most players, but it's not the case. And we can then look at the relationship between squad management and success of teams from a squad composition perspective. And of course, all of this is to fulfill our mission that we gave ourselves, which is to enhance the knowledge around the game from different aspects. That's why we do mandates for clients, but a lot of information is available for free on our website that I really suggest you, as a simple football passionate person, passionate about football, to go through. And it is really, I would say, quite comprehensive what you can find on our website.
Excellent. And you were saying that you had several mandates. They originally focused on Africa, but then over the years more and more into Europe. And are you also in other continents, working with other leagues, other confederations even?
Yeah, of course. Now, recently, we are in discussion with the Saudi Federation, for example. They have a lot of ambition on football, so we are conceiving a platform where they can have access to a lot of data. So, from that perspective, they are particularly interested in Asia, of course, because they are in the AFC. Then we can work with clubs. Also, Brazilian clubs are interested. Now, there are takeovers of clubs. And one key aspect, for example, a lot of US owners taking over clubs. And when you take a club over, then you need to know a bit the value of the players. The players are the main asset for the majority of clubs. So from that perspective, we can also advise owners or the new owners, potential owners, or the old ones when there is a takeover. But also from a regulation perspective, the first studies we did, and we still do a lot of studies for FIFA, which is the governing body, so about loans, about agents, about contract stability, many different topics, about minors. We launch soon a project with a joint project with the European Club Association and FIFA, for example, from a regulatory perspective, to see the U18 ban, how impacts clubs, and what are the career path of players who go abroad as minors. This kind of analysis that are on an international level. We really work on an international level. I think we cannot hear you, Tanya, at least.
Apologies there. I was on
Okay.
mute. There we go. I said, as I was saying, you've spent a lot of time and energy. Obviously, you're very, very experienced. You've spent a lot of time and energy now on the recent doing a study on the recent football transfer. Now that it's closed, do you want, before you go and show us more about the key findings, do you want to just maybe tell us a little bit about what is this report about? What will those who read it? What's the purpose behind this?
Yes, as I said, we developed an algorithm to assess the fair price of football players. To do that, we need to know as many fees that were paid for football players, indemnity fees for transfers. So we collect this information very precisely. It's true, it's time consuming because you have to cross check any possible source. Transparency is not great in football. You still have to do a daily work to find out the most reliable information. And we use this information to run the algorithm, to develop statistical models, but also to have an idea of the trends on the market. So every year, as a bit like Deloitte is doing, for example, we focus mainly on the big five because it is where the big transfer occur and also where the information is more reliable for that study. But again, we cover more leagues. But this study that I will present is really focused on the five major European leagues. And as I said, we try to cross-check any possible source to have information on only on the fees, but also on add-ons, contract duration of players. These are all key variables also for our models, statistical models, with the options, the rate of transfers, because more and more you don't transfer 100% of the rights of a player. There is a split between the federative rights and economic rights, so the former club can keep a certain percentage. So all this information is crucial to be able to follow how the markets evolves, of course, but also then to use within the framework of the transfer value algorithm, which is one key topic at the CIES Football Observatory.
Excellent. Well, we would love to hear for you to show us something. I know that you've put together a very interesting presentation. Do you want to maybe show us a few of those slides and then we can talk through it?
Yes. So I prepared just a few slides. I don't want to bother you, but Joao, you can come back just to do a presentation of these nice buildings that all of you, at least the FIFA Master alumni, know very well. You are still there. We have, as I said, this website that I really invite you as a football fan to visit, and the social media also. We are growing in these different channels. This is more to set up the context. Let's say I'm speaking from this nice building now. Then, with regard to the figures, so we can switch to the next slide. How did Big Five league clubs transfer spend evolve? You can see really how much it has increased from 2013 to 2019. From 2.7 billion up to 6.7 billion. This is including add-ons, irrespective of their effective payment, because we can gather information of add-ons, but we don't really know the conditions. So these are the figures including add-ons. Then you see also from 2019 the extreme impact of the pandemic with 2 years of consecutive decrease. And I think the most interesting aspect here is the rebouncing, the rebouncing that we observed in 2022. It is, we computed up to 6.24 billion euros spent over the calendar year 2022. And it is the second highest figure. Personally, I didn't think that we would have recovered it that much and that quickly. And I'm sure, let's meet within 1 year, but we are in front of a new record, high record for the next season, also because we have the World Cup in November, and we all know after the World Cup there will be some changes because there will be new talents that will emerge from that competition, and it finished just before the transfer window, so we are expecting quite a lot of movements in January already, and then of course for the transfers summer window 2023. But still now it's very interesting, without doing any projection, to see how much the market went back to previous levels. And this can be explained by one key factor, and we can go to the next slide. This factor is the Premier League factor. It's an amazing graph. I like it very much because it shows visually, without any doubt, how much finally the weight of the English Premier League is the blue curve in the upper position. Of course, all the leagues there was they were bouncing back after 2021, but you see how much the Premier League bounced back, and they crashed the previous record by over 1 billion. So it's absolutely crazy. It's really amazing, and you can see this dominance of the Premier League with new owners, also new TV rights deals that were concluded at record high figures with the US, mainly because it's very fashionable, the Premier League game a bit everywhere. So you see, this is really the league that is above any other. And of course, it was already above throughout all this period, but you see the gap in 2022 is just amazing. And also for the next slide, we can see a bit the same conclusion. The net spend, we take into account spending, but also incomes from transfers. The big five leagues are generally negative transfer spend, apart from League One, the French League One, which is, let's say, the fifth of the big five European leagues. Bundesliga and Spanish League, they have negative net spend, but not that much, a bit more the Serie A, but really the driver force of the market is the Premier League, with almost 10 billion negative net spend over the 10 years period, 2023, 2013, 2022. So this is also another way of showing how much the Premier League is driving the market. Last summer, one euro, £1 out of two was spent by English Premier League teams in comparison to all the money spent by big five league clubs. And this was only 1/3 at the, let's say, 5 or 10 years ago. So a dramatic and very rapid increase of English Premier League's dominance for the game in Europe, but of course globally. Then for this next slide is on a club level. Some people always say they were the newcomers, Paris Saint-Germain, Manchester City, having spent the most on the transfer market. This again is net spending for the last 10 years. It is in fact Manchester United that has now the most negative transfer balance. But you see also all the clubs, many English clubs in the top 10, a few Italian ones, but more 8, 9 position, and Barcelona. Apart from that, you see, it's also another way to see how much it's concentrated in England and how much the transfer market is driven by a handful of clubs. So the buyers in the market are diminishing. And then, of course, there is a cascade effect, the big club spending big, and then the smaller club recovering that money and reinvesting the money a bit towards even smaller clubs. And this is a bit the topic of the next slide. We can change to the next slide, which is here are the spenders. The next slide normally Joao should show us the beneficiaries of those who took advantage of these investments. So Joao, please. Because I'm not managing.
That's okay. I think he might be just having a bit of technical issues. While we're on a pause here, anyways, why don't we? I was looking at this, not necessarily this slide, but actually the one when you mentioned the rebounding and recovering quickly from the pandemic. I'm with you. I agree. I think it's actually very impressive how quickly when you look exactly at the numbers, we're back to those 6 billion figure. That's incredible considering, other markets, other industries, not football, but other industries are very slow to pick up. Given your experience, or having done this research, is there a specific reason for that you think that is that why that's happening so fast in football, how it's recovering versus another market?
Yeah, I think the investors, those people, the same are who are now buying clubs a bit in the US. Mainly, it's the biggest economy still in the world. They see football as an asset. They see the potential of football. It shows also that even for the MLS, the Major League Soccer in the US, the entry price to buy a club has dramatically increased, and you see these new owners, new investors. But not only the US, we can see also from the Arabic countries, Qatar, Emiratis, Saudi, the Chinese. In a few years ago, now they stopped a bit this trend, but there is a big interest in football. I think football is still considered as one economy that can grow, has potential to grow. So of course, if you want to take advantage of this growth, you need to be in the biggest leagues, in the biggest championships. So there is, of course, when you want to be promoted to stay in a league, you see some promoted clubs in the Premier League. They buy a lot of players, they transfer players. This is the way for them to ensure these plays, these very lucrative plays in the best leagues, because otherwise it's a very segmented economy. It means that if you are in the best competition, Champions League, Premier League, or on a smaller level, the big five leagues, then you can have a chance to grow, to have more fans, passion around your clubs, develop. If you are out, then it's very difficult, because what we have seen and also what the slides that we can perhaps see after is that it's very segmented. Of course, the biggest earners of the game is quite concentrated as an economy. And then, of course, to spend money on the transfer market is a bit the insurance for you. It doesn't always work. Then, of course, sports incertitude still exists, and some clubs are doing better transfers than others. Some managers are better than others, of course. But in general, we can see more importance given to scouting data, to transferring players, young talents, with a possibility to sell them on a greater figure is quite. Before, perhaps there was more passion in football. Perhaps money not always well spent. It's still the case, but we can see now with the new owners a new strategy coming in with focusing more on talents and to look at value chain of players, trying to also to buy other clubs, to have development channels internally from players like Red Bull Salzburg with Red Bull Bragantino, Red Bull Leipzig, for example, or the City Group. Just read an article yesterday in The Guardian saying that Arsenal is interested to buy a partner club to develop young players. Monaco did the same. You have the US owners now, like the new Chelsea ownership, also thinking at constructing path through different clubs to help this transition from the youth level to the professional game. So of course this has a cost, because the transfer fees are there and must be paid. The big talents now, they are really spotted since the youngest age. Some develop, some no. But in the end, you know a bit their value, their potential that they have. And of course, they can. It's quite speculative in the end. That's the. It's like a financial game. Sometimes we have to say.
No, absolutely. I mean, just before we jump back into the slides again, I was actually just thinking, because it could be a strategy also, clearly the Premier Leagues, and we saw the big five leagues there. That's quite a lot of investment there. I just wonder, smaller leagues, again, based on your data that you've collected, is that a strategy that some of the smaller leagues are following, or is that you don't see that trend? What does the data tell us?
Yeah, then the smaller league also is presented the Big Five. Then there are many even smaller leagues because the Big Five is still at the top. But compared to the English game, even the Italian Serie A, they were used to bring in players for quite a lot of money. Now they moved into another model of adding value to younger players alongside some more experienced one. But the Spanish league, many clubs give a lot of importance of the youth academies also as a way to develop internally their talent. I think this is the key, apart from a few very, very big clubs in England, mainly perhaps Barcelona, Real Madrid, even though they are working well also with at youth level. They don't neglect this aspect, but I think the key for the majority of clubs is to have strong youth academies because there you can do a different the difference to perhaps have good talents. Then they will go away, of course, because there is more money elsewhere. But this is to the advantage of both the club financially and also for players. Some players go too fast into the biggest level of the game and they got lost a bit. But if they stay perhaps longer in Ajax, in Salzburg, in Benfica, these are good clubs, but even in smaller club, depending on the potential of the players, they can really develop play football. If they go too fast in the big clubs, then it becomes difficult for them, irrespective of their talent, if they don't are fielded regularly. So of course, it's all about finding the good balance also from a player perspective, from an agent perspective, to find a good club for the player at a good moment where he can really develop. And the big clubs are even ready to spend more for one player that has already 3 years of professional career, let's say in the Portuguese league. It shows you that the player is reliable. If you, of course, they also transfer players at a younger age, but often it doesn't end up very well because these players need a first professional experience, perhaps at a lower level. So this is why all the ecosystem is very important, and all the clubs should give a lot of importance, of course, to scouting, but also to developing through their own youth academy very, very good players, and that's their insurance.
I was just going, that leads me to my next question for you, Raffaele. You mentioned about the youth clubs and partner clubs, and now potentially the bigger clubs buying, I don't want to say training clubs, but let's say a lower level club to enhance the development of players. We see that a lot. I would say in other pro leagues like the NBA, NHL, they do that a lot. Is that something that we're going to see more of, do you think, especially in relation to, of course, the bigger sort of goal of transfers and creating these very sorry, I'm missing my words right now, in terms of making these transfers at these very high levels and what we're seeing there. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, definitely. We see plenty of examples every day, and I take advantage of the opportunity to promote a bit the CIES Sports Intelligence also with a FIFA alumnus, Fernando Reutemann, that who set up this group within the CIS, is monitoring the multi-club ownership and changes in ownership. Is a dramatic change in a few years. You had really a movement towards these, and this is, you are right, a bit the US model with farm teams, feeder teams. Because of course, football club, you have 11 players on the pitch, on the bench, perhaps you have 7 more. Over a season, the biggest clubs never field more than 25 players, let's say. So you don't have space and room for everybody, despite the very hectic schedule of games. And if you play just the small games, doesn't really help you a lot neither. So that's why these big clubs are thinking. Some have already done. Some are thinking of doing, to have a chains of club, a network where you can really have different levels of competition in different countries. For South Americans, it's better to go in perhaps in Portugal, Spain. For the North, from the Nordic countries, more in Belgium. I don't know. You can also take into account these cultural aspects that are also important, because we are speaking about human beings. In the end, we should never forget about this. Even though there is, as I say, a very strong financial game, in the end, there are human beings behind that. So creating the best conditions also for the players to develop. And these can be seen favorably. There are plenty of good examples, but there are also side effects like controlling too many clubs, too many players, player hoarding, preventing competition, like locking some players that could play elsewhere, just to keep them and prevent them to develop for other clubs. So there are pros and cons, of course. But let's say we at the CIES Observatory, we try to keep to stay factual and objective. What we can say, we observe a clear trend towards this integration of many clubs around one pivotal club, let's say, or many of them.
Excellent. I will let you continue with the slides there. If we can get those there,
Yes.
so we can
So
continue.
far, we presented the spenders, the big clubs, the Premier League, Paris Saint-Germain, can be Juventus or Milan, even though, as I said, now they are struggling more to be really active on the transfer market, but these are the figures for the last 10 years. And we can switch to the next slides, more on the beneficiaries of this transfer spending. Joao said us that it was okay. I hope it is exactly. So what were the beneficiaries of this transfer spending? And you can see here the main beneficiaries are still within the major leagues, because the big transfers occur within the main league. So about 2/3 of players, of money invested in transfers by big five league clubs, stay 29% within the same league. For example, Premier League, Serie A to Serie A, and 36% to other big five leagues, Premier League to Spanish Liga, Premier League to French League One, etc. So in total, 2/3 of this money stays at the highest level of the game, but of course it goes a bit down from, and we will see the clubs on an individual level who benefited the most from this transfer, let's say from Real Madrid to Sevilla, for example, or last summer Brighton had the most positive net spend because they were able to transfer, for example, Cucurella is for quite a lot of money to Chelsea, but 1/3 only of this money goes back to non-big five league clubs in the end, whether it is for other UEFA countries, and we will see which one also, to lower division of big five league countries, but not that much, only 2%. Non-UEFA countries is only 6%. Why? Because again, these players coming from outside of Europe, perhaps they need to be, of course, there are quite big transfers, for example, from Argentina directly to the Big Five or Brazil. But in general, these players, whether they are not paid that much at first, or they are first transferred to Portugal, the Netherlands, Switzerland, Belgium, this stepping stone country. And this is interesting because it shows a bit these value chains. The player really acquire a lot of value once he has already proven himself in the biggest leagues. So there are some clubs even within the Big Five, that are really benefiting the most from this money, or the club outside of the Big Five who are participating in the Champions League. And we can switch to the next slide. These are the leagues that were the main beneficiaries outside of the Big Five. So you really see the Portuguese Liga is the main stepping stone to the Big Five, whether it is for Portuguese players, they have very good academies in Portugal, or it can be for Brazilian players that first came to Portugal, the Argentinians. I remember Ramirez, the Brazilian, Di Maria a few years ago, but also more recently Luis Diaz from Colombia, then to Portugal, and then to England, or Darwin Nunez from Uruguay to Spain, first Portugal, and then to Liverpool again. Then you have the second division of the English League, the Championship. They are taking advantage of their proximity with the Premier League clubs, so the best talents there are paid quite a lot of money to reach the Premier League mainly. And then you have the Dutch league, the Eredivisie, is also a very important stepping stone with very good talents there, whether again, as for Portugal, local talents or foreign talents first imported to the Netherlands, finding the way, like Anthony, the Brazilian, played a couple of years there in Ajax, or Martinez, that who also, as Anthony, went then to Manchester United. So to adapt to the European game and then to do the next step, because if you prove yourself in Ajax, Benfica, or this kind of clubs in the Champions League, then you are like labeled as ready to be in the top, in the very top leagues in Europe and in the world. And then with regard to clubs, it's in the next slide, it shows here which are the main beneficiaries, and you can see those really are participating, most of them in the Champions League: Benfica, Ajax, Porto, Sporting Lisbon, Salzburg, Eindhoven, Bruges in Belgium, Dinamo Zagreb at 10th position. They just beat Chelsea in the Champions League, so they are also, let's say, in a good position to transfer players to the Big Five. And these clubs are really benefiting a lot. Then those who are at a lower level in this league, much less, because of course they have not this possibility to win trophies in the league. And it's a bit a vicious circle, so the competitive balance is not optimal in the game. But still, the transfer system helps to some extent to preserve a bit, because of course if you transfer a player, perhaps you lose from a sporting perspective on a short term, but still it gives you, at least for these clubs, some good money to reinvest, whether it is to train good players or to recruit some new ones. So I think it was the last slide, this one.
Okay, excellent. Actually, as we're talking about the beneficiaries there, I mean, I know that it's one thing I took away was, I mean, it's very focused on the Europeans, and Brazil, Argentina is up there as well. I mean, we have an audience from around the world here watching us today. What about Asia? Does that play into, I didn't see them in the top 10. Maybe that's the top 20 or 30. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, Asia is an interesting case because there is money there, especially in Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Qatar, to a certain extent China, but even if they change a bit the policy. Mm-hmm. But these leagues I just mentioned are more focused for now to recruit players from Europe who are a bit at the end of the career. And then they struggle really to add value to these players because they are more towards the end of the career. The MLS in the US was doing the same, but they changed the policy. Now they are more focusing on younger players, especially from South America. The main partner of Argentinian clubs for the first time in 2021 was no more a European country, whether Italy or Spain, but the MLS. So it's like developing a bit as a stepping stone role, the US. And they will grow, of course. because they grow from an economic perspective, but also because with more fans involved in the games locally, but they also evolve in their position in the global market, being able to recruit very young talents and then for the best ones to transfer them to mainly to the English Premier League, as we have seen the most lucrative market. The Asian is bit difficult for the Arabic countries because perhaps they still lack a bit of talents there. There are quite aging leagues, so they should put more emphasis, I think, to the youth, the training of youth talent, and to perhaps try to focus more on younger talents to be able to promote them into the next level. Japan is another case like South Korea. There is very good youth training, very good clubs there, but so far they are struggling really to transfer them at a good price, let's say. Japanese clubs, I spoke with some actors there, they are not very smart, let's say, in selling their players, even though some Japanese clubs did very greatly in the best leagues, even for the South Korean. But so far, they are struggling to promote them in the best way, I would say. There is talent there. So, of course, it's a matter of time, and they will also find the strategies, I think, to take more advantage of this investment made by the clubs in the richest leagues.
Absolutely. I mean, it's very interesting to see, it's a little bit of a mix of funding, right? Finding the money for, the interest, also developing these young players and trying to find the right strategy around that and so on. But very interesting. Thank you for those insights. Given sort of everything that you've now presented to us and all the research that you've done to go into this great study, was there anything that was surprising or that you thought, okay, a bit surprised by the data, or thought, okay, didn't think it was going to go that way?
Yeah, as I said, I was surprised by this Premier League. Is not full surprise because we know it's the dominant league, but you can really see how much the pandemic weakened clubs in any other league apart from the Premier League. So the pandemic really increased very fast this dominance, and which is, let's say, not very sound for the future of the game, because when an economy is too much concentrated, especially football, where you need competition, that's not good. I mean, so of course it's difficult to say to the Premier League not to spend the money they have, because they have money, they are not indebted. Of course, some clubs are, but in general, their financial situation in international comparison is not that bad in the end. So they are absolutely free to do what they do with the money they earn. But this is more a regulatory perspective, but it should find, like the Super League debate last year, we should take care of not destroying too much this competition, because competitive balance, because in the end it could be an issue. And that's a bit what I see from these figures, these quite surprising figures of not the dominance, but the strong increase in dominance after the pandemic.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point and very good takeaway there. So, I mean, we do have an audience here. Based on the data and everything that you've shown us, is there anything that you would, any lessons that you would share with the audience based on your research, based on the data, based on the findings?
Depends a bit on the audience. I don't know who is listening to us, but for sure, if you are running a club, or let's say you are active in a not dominant country or club, this is anyway the majority of clubs and leagues in the world. You have only a few handful of dominant leagues and clubs. The rest, they, as I said, put emphasis on youth training. Of course, then we will lose also, because regulation don't protect you at the best always some 16-year-old players can leave your club to a bigger club, and you don't really earn from him, and that's a pity, let's say. But it shouldn't prevent these clubs to do this job, because this is, and to be close to their territory also. There are global brands, but don't try to imitate Real Madrid or Manchester United. If you are, even I spoke yesterday, listening to a presentation of Pablo Longoria, the president of Olympique de Marseille. They say in Bayern Monaco, Bayern Munich was Michael Gerlinger, a former also FIFA Master alumni, who is also the director of Bayern Munich, who said, okay, global, and is Bayern Munich fine, but let's already try to have a very good, loyal relationship with our existing fans. Take care of your fans, of your territory. Be close to the people, be close to the identity of the city. You won't perhaps win the Champions League because of the divide, but still you can be proud of participating in it, to do some excellent results, sometimes on a domestic level, to win the national cup. I come from a region, Ticino. We won the cup. The main club in Ticino, southern part of Switzerland, Lugano, won the cup. It was a massive enthusiasm in the city. And that's are small things, but in the end, then if you give a chance to local players, you are close to the people there. You invest your role in your territory in terms of social inclusion. Football should remind the cultural importance of football. So of course you can see and the big clubs and try to imitate them, to say to go on the market speculating on player, but take care of your own players, of your own talents from your territory, and over the long term, even though you don't win, or you are facing relegation, sometimes difficult periods, at least you are coherent and people understand what you are doing and the importance you have towards your territory.
Excellent. Thank you. Great insights. I'm just going to actually open it up to the audience in case there are any questions. Please feel free to write them in the comments section. I do have one that has come in that we'll ask you now, Raffaele. It has to do with the strong trends of transfers. Is there a strong trend of transfers between clubs of the same owners, meaning multi-club ownerships?
Yes, definitely. Then, of course, for example, let's take the City Group example. They control Manchester City, but they control Troyes in France, Girona in Spain, in other continents, Lommel in Belgium, in Uruguay, Montevideo City, etc. Just a few of these players so far, they really reach the biggest club, which is Manchester City. But some of them, they still have a value, and then they are transferred for even more than the cost they had at the beginning to other clubs. Pablo Maffeo, this is an example, went through Girona, Manchester City, then he went to Stuttgart for more than 10 million, for example. And they are still earning money through this system. Then it's difficult to really, let's say, have this talent that really explodes and goes until Manchester City. There are just no real examples so far, but it's sufficient that it happens once or two. And the club perhaps spent in training solidarity, let's say 1 million for the player. And then suddenly he can be brought to Manchester City instead of signing a player for 60 million. You can imagine how much they can save money from a single player. So it's not a matter of one every year or more than one every year, etc. It is sufficient for the business to work that one big talent every 5 years, and they will achieve this, because of course if you only have one farm team, perhaps 20 more players who are potentially eligible in the future, it's one thing. But if you have 5 teams and 100 players, of course you increase your chances. Then is it fair? Is it good for the game? Is it good for competition in other leagues? again, it's there are pros and cons. But from a purely financial perspective, because of these clubs having so much money, investing a few millions in partner clubs, even though, of course, the transfers occur more between partner clubs than from partner clubs to the pivotal club, at least in this case. But of course, it's sufficient, as I said, to explain why they do that. Then there are other cases like more complicated, where there were more transfers, at least 10 transfers, let's say, is Red Bull Salzburg and Red Bull Leipzig. And even, for example, recently Sesko is the new Haaland, apparently, because Haaland was in Salzburg, then he went to Dortmund, and then now to Manchester City. There is a young Slovenian who is doing greatly. He scored a fantastic goal in the last game with the Slovenian team, but it's not only about this goal. We know that he is a fantastic talent. He was already signed by Red Bull Leipzig for the next season, like they did with Aidara, Sobolsai, and many other, Naby Keita at the time, many other players. So this is internal change working more also because the pivotal club, the gap between Red Bull Salzburg and Red Bull Leipzig is not that great as between Manchester City and the foreign. So in some cases there are more transfers, in some cases less, but in both cases there is an economic rationale to do that.
Excellent. All right. I have one last question because I know I'm a bit conscious of time here. Last question here. I mean, you've told us so many great things from the data that you've collected from this report, so many of the trends that are happening. What do you think that global football and clubs should be thinking about next when it comes to football transfers, looking ahead to 23 and beyond? If you could, in a very short answer, what do you think that they should be thinking about, focusing on?
Yeah, I think, as I said, for the medium size or small clubs, it's difficult to transfer a player for big money because they need still experience. They need to go through bigger club. So what one advice I always give, and clubs try to do, of course, they know, is to have add-ons. So you transfer a player for a certain amount. You include conditional payments and also a share on the future transfer. Because sometimes you can transfer a player for 1 million, let's say, it's already good, you're happy. But if you keep 10% of future transfer, in 1 year, these players can be worth 50 million. And the 10% of 50 million is 5 million. It's 5 times more than the million you were able to get at first instance. So work really on the sell, what we call in the industry sell on. And also perhaps put pressure on governing bodies to have this sell on compulsory. That would be a good reform also for FIFA to say, okay, now there is a solidarity contribution, 5% for international transfer, which is great. But let's say make compulsory a 10% sell on for training clubs. And that would change a lot of things because, of course, for the bigger club, they will lose some money. Not the biggest one, they are net spenders, but the intermediate one. But the smaller one will really win from the situation, and it can make a difference because then they can, if you have a bit more money, you can keep the player a bit longer, offer them a bit more of salaries, and negotiate better contracts or better fees with potential buyers.
Fantastic. I mean, I think that actually is a fantastic point to leave on. Again, it's a one way to elevate the global game, right? So fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Poli, for your time. What an enlightening discussion that we've had. I mean, it's a shame that we only have the hour together. I think if we could keep talking about this, such a fascinating topic. So we will close for today. And I hope that for our audience around the world, I hope that this inspires you to continue the conversations in the fields that you're working in. I've enjoyed this session. I hope you have as well. You're encouraged to review the library of videos through from our other 3 seasons. We have a number of topics that we've discussed as well. which also feature more FIFA Master alumni. And so please have a look there also at the YouTube channel of the FIFA Master alumni, and as well as the Latin American webinar series, which just started last season. So again, the next webinar coming up for CIES is probably in about the next month. We're in the process of finalizing the date and the topic, but we'll keep you posted on that. If you'd like to stay tuned, please check out, as I mentioned, all of the social media channels, as well as CIES's website. Again, with that, I wish everybody a continued rest of your day or evening, wherever you are in the world. A big thank you again, Raffaele, for your time. Very much appreciated. And to our audience, we'll see you next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.